Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So this is the last webinar from ABAF, American Bay Alumni Foundation of this year. So we have a truly special guest with us today, Mr. Kevin Kelly, one of the most original thinkers on technology, culture, and the future. So I'm really excited about this conversation. And if you've read any of his work, you know we're in for something very thought-provoking. So for those of you who may not know Kevin, he's the founding executive editor of Wired magazine, a very prolific author whose books include The Inevitable, What Technology Wants, and most recently, Excellent Advice for a Living. But beyond these credentials, Kevin has spent decades asking the questions that really matter, not just what technology can do, but what it should do to us and how we can shape a future worth living in. So today we're going to explore some of Kevin's most compelling ideas. We'll talk about why he believes in optimism is just helpful, it's actually a moral obligation. We'll dive into his concept of protopia, a future that gets incrementally better, but not perfect, but it is persistently improving. And we'll also discuss what it means to be a good ancestor in the age of artificial intelligence
Mhm.
and how we can learn to navigate a world that's changing faster than ever before. So, Kevin, thank you so much for being with us here today.
I am really delighted and honored as well, and I appreciate the closeness in which you have looked at my work. And it's always a pleasure to have questions that no one has asked me before. So I'm looking forward to that.
Cool. Yeah, I'm also super excited. Yeah, so I wanted to start with what might be your most, I guess, provocative idea is that optimism is a moral obligation. So most people think of optimism as like maybe a temperament, like you either have it or you don't, or maybe sometimes as a luxury, something you can afford when things are going well. But you're saying something that is much stronger, that we actually have a duty to be optimistic, because pessimism prevents us from building the future we want. So can you walk us through like how you came to believe this, like optimism is something we owe to the future? And is there a particular moment or experience that crystallized this for you?
I don't. Let me start with what I think it is, um, which is that I think optimism is a choice that people make. It's a choice that I make. I choose to be as optimistic as I can each day and hopefully more optimistic than I was the day before or the year before. And I think the reason why we ought to be as optimistic as we can be, understanding that it's not just a temperament, that we can all become more optimistic, is that it is the way that we make our futures good. So if we look around, wherever you are, if you look around, all the good things that you are surrounded by were made by the optimists of the past. There are people, each good thing is a passion project for somebody who believed that this thing, whether it's a building or an invention or an institution, that this thing should exist, could exist, and imagined it in some form in order to make it real. And that act of imagining and believing it could happen is optimism. And that means that the present has been shaped by the optimists of the past, and the future is going to be shaped by the optimists of today. And I want to be one of those. So, if you have a desire to shape the future, then you need to be as optimistic as you possibly can. That's the that's the first part of one of the reasons why. But there are others, and the larger argument is that what we are doing in making things happen as an optimist, what we're doing is filling the world with options and opportunities that don't exist today. So where we are in this sort of cone through time of expanding choices and possibilities, which is enabled by the things that we invent, and our innovations, technology, all that. And when I say technology, I'm using it in the broadest sense to mean things like a calendar is technology, things like reading and writing is technology, books are technology, all the things that we have invented, or even our own sense of laws. That's all part of this expanding realm of stuff. And the purpose of all this stuff is to enable more and more people to fulfill themselves, to find their genius and to share it with us. And we need a, more and more choices in order to satisfy the huge variety and kinds of people that that biology is capable of making. And so each one of us, each person listening here has a different face that's never been no other human, and you at the same time have you have a personality and you have a set of talents and abilities and experiences that are unique to you. And what we want to do collectively is to equip you with the tools and the options and opportunities that you need to share, to discover, and then to share your genius, your particular abilities. And so that means that we have to kind of make stuff happen. I mean, part of the regime that you need is clean water and food and clothing and shelter and healthcare. That's all part of what you need. But we also need other stuff. Right now, if you are an author, you needed to have language and writing and printing. If you were doing books, you needed lots of stuff that society would supply you. And the story I like to tell is if we could imagine Beethoven or Mozart being born 1,000 or 2,000 years before they were, when there was no piano or orchestra. And what a shame that would have been for them to have been born without that, because they have that innate genius. And maybe that can express in some other way, but I don't think so. So they would have been a loss to them and to us. And so we were rewarded by having developed a technology that was perfect for them. And we could say the same about if George Lucas had been born long before there was cinema, cameras, and computers, what a loss that would have been. And so there's probably a Shakespeare today born, and she's waiting for us to make the technology that she needs to express her genius in a way that we have not seen before. And so I feel an urgency, an obligation to keep inventing and making new things and new choices and new possibilities. Um, and that's what we get from technology. We don't really eliminate too many problems. We just kind of shift problems around. We get new problems because this technology that we use to solve old problems, will that cells generate new problems, and that will require new technology, which will have new problems. And that cycle seems to be just spinning wheels, but it's actually not, because what it's doing again is it's each one of these new technologies and new problems are new opportunities, new possibilities that we have not seen before. And that is what is expanding over time. That's what progress really is in the end, is increased choices. And so this is a long-winded way of arguing why you should be as optimistic as you can be, and both for your own benefit and for the benefit of the world.
Cool. Yeah, this is really helpful. And I think having concrete example always like make abstract ideas more tangible. So is there someone that you look to as a model of this type of like urgent optimism, like whether someone from history or like someone alive
Mhm.
today that embodies what you mean by like genuine constructive optimism?
That's a really great question. Um, I think most habitual inventors are by definition incredibly optimistic in both envisioning what they believe. So they really kind of get stuck on what could be versus what is. And that, I know people like Larry Page, co-founder of Google, is relentless about imagining what could be and then trying to work towards that, even if it seems sort of implausible or unlikely or maybe even impossible. Um, he's doing it all the time. That's just, I think Jeff Bezos is also like that. Elon Musk, they're asking themselves, in principles, if you look at the physics, if you look at the basic design of the universe, is this possible? And if it is, why can't we have it? Why can't it go like that? I mean, is there? And so that ability to visualize something, first of all, you have to kind of like question the assumptions about why things can't be, and then you have to imagine what could be, and then you have to imagine the reality. You have to imagine in details the way it would work in enough to talk to other people to convince them to join you to make it happen. Because none of this stuff happens alone. There is part of the reason why we want to visualize it is in order to share it, in order to make it a joint project. Um, if if things could be accomplished by one person alone, there would be no need to kind of explain things or share things. But the kinds of futures that we are talking about now are incredibly collective, incredibly collaborative. And so you have to be able to communicate that vision. And that requires a degree of detail and plausibility that again you have to kind of step into. And it's very, very important. And it's one of the reasons why I think right now a lot of people around the world are fear AI because I would say 99% of the stories or images they've ever seen of AI are stories that don't end well. They're disasters. If AI is in a movie, it's not going to be a happy ending, and unless the people kill the AIs. And so, um, we lack as a society we lack pictures of the future where AI is beneficial, and that makes it really hard to make a beneficial AI if because we don't have stories about it um, happening well. We don't know what we're even aiming for. Um, there's maybe the Jetsons, the cartoon The Jetsons, where they have robots that I think were pretty beneficial, but um, that's what we're reduced to. It's just something as cartoony as that.
Cool. Yeah, like really appreciate like, the examples in this framing. So I want to push a little bit more on the practical side because this is probably where most people get stuck, like in the day-to-day. We wake up, we check the news, it feels like the world is on fire. And as you said, because bad things almost always happen faster than good
Right.
things, and they're more dramatic and dominate our news cycles. And our brains are wired to pay attention to threats naturally. And this is all very overwhelming. So, given this reality, how do we actually be able to practice this optimism day to day? Are there like very specific like habits or methods that you use to help you stay grounded?
Yes, I think you're very astute to notice that most news, even from the highest quality source, is almost by definition going to be bad news. Anything that's happened in the last 5 minutes is probably bad news. And so, therefore, one thing is that you just really do want to not focus on the news, is to, in some ways, put as much of that outside of you, behind you. It doesn't mean you stop reading or being informed, but you want to concentrate on what's actually new, which is, science and things like that, that take a longer time to both happen, accomplish, and even to be conveyed. I mean, it's you can't just often get it in a headline. And so yeah, one thing is don't spend much time in the news. The second thing is take a longer point of view. The longer your horizon, the easier it is to be optimistic. And what happens is that the longer horizon, it can kind of overcome the ordinary oscillations of up and down news, bad news, depression, excitement, bubbles. They're all kind of overwhelmed by the longer term curve rather than all the ups and downs. And so the longer you can actually look at things at the longer viewpoint, the easier it will be to be optimistic. And then I think um, the third way is again a longer view, but a longer view of the past, meaning that you read a lot of history, read really good history, read history based on as much as possible evidence, scholarly study, um, and that will help you to understand the reality of progress, that progress is real, that we are actually better on average today than on average 100 years ago or 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago. And so having a good sense of history in its details, and not just the political stuff. I mean, what life was actually like, what what people were doing, what kind of choices they had. That will also help you become optimistic today.
Cool. Thank you so much for all these very helpful, tips that we can apply to our day-to-day life. So just sort of circling back that you mentioned that to build a better future, it is a very collaborative effort. So people who are for those who are already optimistic and ready to take the lead, how do we bring other people along? Like, how do we inspire optimism in other people around us without coming across as preachy or out of
Yeah,
touch?
yeah, it's a really good question. Just let me think for a second. I think what I'm finding out that I have a bit of advice that the best way to criticize something is to make something better. And so for me, the way to make optimism exciting or appealing without being preachy is to come up with some great stories that are optimistic scenarios or optimistic visions or optimistic stories of the future, and let that become something that people can adopt or respond to or enjoy or in some ways deal with. And so uh, I think I think the influence of stories is almost dangerous. Um, so stories incredibly they punch way below above their weight because they're fairly simple to make, but if they work, they're very, very powerful and they can outlast facts and they can overwhelm facts at times. So um, I think if we can make stories about the future that are optimistic and that people enjoy and like, I think that is for me probably the number one means of changing people's minds. I don't think arguing like what I just did. I think the case I just did, I don't think changes anybody's mind.
I see. So like actually coming with very compelling and engaging
Yeah.
vision can help
Stories.
inspire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
stories. I mean, I actually looked at the evidence to try and find out, but I believe that a lot of the people in Silicon Valley who worked on the iPhone were inspired by the Star Trek communicator. I mean, Nokia very early on had the flip phone, which was very close to them. I mean, we had walkie-talkies for a very long time. They weren't, the idea of a portable communication wasn't really new, but the idea of this little thing that you held that um, was a communicator was a very, very powerful pole star for people. Something that they were kind of, they could see it in their mind and they wanted to make it happen. And that was just a piece of fiction. You know, the same thing with beam me up. That'll be there for a very long time. There'll be generations of people trying to make the beamer, whatever that's called, the transmitter. I don't know the name of it, but that thing that could do that. That will stick in people's minds and be something to aim for. And those are simple, almost kind of standalone technologies. What we want, what we need more of, is sort of a more complicated vision of a lifestyle or more complicated vision of what a city looks like, which we haven't done very much of. Sometimes some movies get into it. I worked on Minority Report with Steven Spielberg, trying to do that world of 2054, of trying to imagine what that looked like. It was all done in one weekend, and I think you could, again, you could make it even better. You could give it more time. You could make alternative versions that would compel people saying, "Yeah, I think that would be a future I'd like to live in."
I see. So really just spending time like thinking about what a desirable future looks like and painting a
Right,
concrete picture.
right. I've asked many people to give me a very short summary of what their desirable future is, and it's really shocking how few people can answer that question. Um, and I mean, at some level, yeah, you want peace, you want justice, but specifically, it's tough. It's hard to do. It's hard to imagine. It's much easier to imagine the apocalypse. It's much easier to imagine the barren world after the nuclear war, and there's two survivors. That's very easy to imagine, but the alternative is very difficult to imagine.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I guess it might be a fun exercise, like if, say, after this talk, everyone spends some time thinking about.
Yeah, and if you really want to make it challenging, I'll give you like 200 words. Do it in 200 words, and it's. I mean, yeah, um, and it's because and by the way, um, very few, or if almost none, including my own, will be actually correct. None of us will get it right. And just as I've been involved in doing scenarios for 40 years, 30 years, 30 years. And nobody in all the thousands of scenarios thinking about this year came up with what we actually have this year. It was just like, no, we weren't even close to imagining the reality of today. And if anybody had suggested it back 25 or 30 years ago, we would have said, that's not plausible. That's not remotely plausible. So, so it isn't a matter of being making a correct prediction. It's not a matter of predicting. These aren't predictions. These are hopes. These are destinations. These are models. These are dreams. These are things to guide and inspire us. They're not really predictions.
Great. So you've coined this term protopia, which isn't about reaching utopia, which is like a perfect state. It is about incremental improvement,
Right.
the world getting 1 or 2% better year after year, which almost like sound pretty anticlimactic compared to like the
Yeah.
grand visions that we
Sure.
usually hear about.
Yeah.
So can you help us understand like why is protopia the right frame and what does progress actually look like through this lens?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think utopia is not only impossible. I think it's also undesirable. I mean, I think it would be a horrible place because it would be static. I mean, that's by definition, it's sort of this place that doesn't have any problems or problem free. And again, I don't think that's even remotely possible, but it also just sounds like I'd be bored to death there. So, so that's not my optimistic view of the future is where we have fewer and fewer problems. Quite the contrary. I think new technology, the more powerful technologies are, the more powerful their problems. I think AI is the most powerful technology we've ever invented, and it will produce the biggest, most difficult problems for us. So I'm not saying our problems are smaller than we thought, or that will make our problems smaller. I think they'll make our problems bigger. However, I think that the solution to our problems, big or small, is not less technology, but better technology, more technology, better. And uh, so that world of the future that has more technology and more problems um, can still be a desirable future because our abilities to solve problems is expanding faster than our problems. And so if we are able to create a few percent more than we destroy every year, we can make it just we can make more good than bad by just a tiny, tiny bit. Then that tiny, tiny bit compounded over centuries or years, decades, is progress. So it's not big. It's a tiny little delta. And that sliver of net gain is all we need. If we can just do 1% more good than bad, then we can have progress. The problem is you look around and it's 49% crap and horrific and trash and harm and 49%. It's like a lot. So if you give me a list, if you say, well, what about this and what about that? And then I'm going to say, yes, yes, yes. Those are all problems. Those are big problems. Those are serious problems. But the list of all the things good is even longer by 1%, which is not really visible in today. You can't really notice. You don't notice 1%. The only way you notice 1% is it compounding over time and looking behind us and seeing the fact that there is this creep, this little tiny small elevation over time. It's not really evident in the moment because it's small. And so that's protopia. The pro is from like progress or proceed or prototype, where we're prototyping the future, or pro versus con. It's all those roots of going forward and getting better, but not by much. But that's all we need.
Yeah, this is very insightful. I also want to touch on your idea of us trying to be a good ancestor, right? Making decisions today that our future generation will thank us for, and which seems pretty central to your thinking. And you've put forward this concrete proposal for how to do that in the age of AI, and I think
Mm-hmm.
you call that public intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you walk us through what you mean by public intelligence and how you see it as an act of ancestral responsibility?
Yeah. Let me just start with the ancestral responsibility. So the idea is that we are the kind of system we have right now has a huge bias to the last 5 minutes and the next 5 minutes, to the short term. Um, the way capital markets work is they're going to reward you quarter by quarter. They really aren't reserving reward for something long term. It's you have to think about, and survival is a very short term prospect where you've got to, you know, can't do long term planning if you don't exist. So you have to actually fundamentally make sure you survive, and that can become very, very short term. And so, so there's a bias in the sense of the amount of time, energy, whatnot that we put on the short term, which is legitimate to a large degree. And but it's not the only thing. And what we know about being a civilization around for many millennia at this point is that overall we do better collectively and individually if we collaborate not just across space but also across time. So long-term projects are a way of collaborating with future generations, and we can embark on things beginning with things that we may not finish in this generation, that it may take more than a single generation to complete, or to at least to keep going on. And so once we start thinking about collaboration across time, um, we think about generational scale qualities, generational scale virtues, generational scale skills. And one kind of easy way to think about generational projects is to imagine future generations thanking earlier generations for doing things, being grateful that they started it. And we reduce that to like the idea of being a good ancestor, where your descendants would thank you for building roads, thank you for making a cathedral, thank you for starting the library, thank you for beginning Wikipedia, whatever it was. And so that idea of that perspective of looking at things over generational, or sometimes we call it civilizational scale, is what we call the long now, where instead of thinking about the next 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes, which is the short now, you say now includes the next 5,000 years and the last 5,000 years. That's where I'm living. I'm living not just in 5 minutes. I'm living within thousands of years. That's my perspective. That's my awareness, and we call that the long now. And there's a foundation set up to try and foster and promote that kind of thinking. And we're not. It's not saying what you have to. You're not saying you have to have a 1,000 year plan. It's not. It's not planning. We're not talking about planning per se. It's a perspective. It's keeping. It's collaborating over time. It's respecting future generations and their interests. Plans don't last very long. There's very few plans that last more than a year or two at the best because things change so much. It's hard to kind of make planning. You can certainly make a plan, but you have to understand that you can't make a 100-year plan and stick to it. That's just not going to happen. There's no way. But you can have a 100-year perspective. You can begin things that have a direction, that are emergent, that are pregnant for 100 years. And so um, it's a perspective rather than a plan. And if you can maintain that perspective, then you can reach 100 years and you can transmit something over 100 years. It's really, plans don't are easily transmitted, but values can be transmitted over 100 years. Traditions, what traditions are about. So you want to have a tradition that respects 3 generations and that in the future, and that would be better than a plan. So um, that is the idea of the long term. And one of the concrete proposals that I am suggesting that would be really great to work on is something I call public intelligence. And it's a form of AI that is more collectively owned rather than by either a corporation or by national government. So right now, the major AI frontier models are all commercial. Um, there's about 28 sovereign AI attempts or different countries around the world who decided to nationalize and make a public, in that sense, AI around a sovereign interest of a nation. I'm talking about something a little bit even broader that's more like the internet. So if I ask you who owns the internet, it's not really clear. There's commercial interests, there's governmental interests, there's individual. It's just like there's a lot of stakeholders. And that's what we want for a large AI called public intelligence, or sometimes called public AI, or sometimes called the AI Commons. And it may be more than one. Well, it's probably going to be more than one machine, but it will be maybe even more than one model. It's um, it's AIs that are publicly funded, publicly accountable, publicly transparent, publicly trained, meaning that they train on all the documents in all the languages in the world, whether they're copyrighted or not. It's truly a human endeavor. It's accessible to anybody, everywhere, for all time, and so that is. And the idea, of course, is that um, with many stakeholders globally, that it becomes much more of a planetary, human commons, something that we could all both enjoy and trust. There's, I mean, what we kind of know about open source. This would also be on the open source direction. Is that it's trustable because it is open, and so and I think with AI, I think the issue of trust is going to come up a lot of being able to trust it. Um, and I think the open source, in a certain sense, I don't think this is going to be the first AI that we make. I think open source, uh, in some ways, is needs to be needs to will probably follow the commercial um, versions of things, which are in some ways like preparing. They're like weeds that are opportunistic, that prepare the ground for what could be open source later on. And so I'm afraid that this is not going to be the first, and probably can't be the first large AI that we have. But I think we can still work towards making it happen in a kind of like a second generation. And so, again, I'm not making this public intelligence. I don't have the technical chops to do so. My role is to tell a story about it. My role is to give it a name and a picture and help people see it as something to aim for. And that's, again, the act of optimism.
So this idea of public intelligence, as you said, like might come up in like future generations. It will probably take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And it's probably a little unclear like how it's gonna, come about. But is there something you think that we can do today or tomorrow that will help us move towards that direction?
Yeah. So there is a protocol being developed, and there is some nonprofit collaboration happening. There's a group at MIT called Public AI, I think. Um, so there are these little early starts at this, and I would say the way to help it twofold. One is if you have any skills, you could volunteer to help with this at a very early stage. Um, Secondly, I think we can disseminate the meme. We can um, broadcast the picture. We can retell the story. Uh, and I think that is not to be underestimated. I think the value of making it a possible destination and giving it the picture and talking about it and having it be just more than one person, having that be kind of spread through is really, really important and galvanizing to make it come about. And so that's the third thing, I guess. And um, at some point in time, there will be people who will use some of their wealth to fund it in the same way that Wikipedia is um, funded by charitable donations of a larger sort. Um, and so that diversion, that kind of reallotment of resources is also something to keep in mind. Again, um, it's not everybody, but if you talk about it and if you imagine it, then the person with the money will find it easier to divert resources to it. So um, if you have skills, you can volunteer. If you don't, you can talk about it.
Great, this is very helpful. We'll open up questions soon. So if you have any questions in your mind, like you can start forming questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and I'll help you ask those questions. Cool. So I'm gonna continue on to my next question, which So there's another theme that like runs through your work that feels especially relevant right now, especially when new tools and technology seem to pop up like every hour.
Mhm.
Um, so this thing is learning how to learn. So what does learning how to learn actually look like for you, especially in these days? Like, can you share like how you personally practice learning how to learn?
Yeah, yeah. So um, again, to kind of unpack the idea is that a lot of people kind of want to know, well, what is with the coming of AI, doing more of what humans can do, used to do. The question is, well, what do we teach in schools? And for me, the answer has been very, very clear for a long time that the primary skill that you want to graduate with in high school, at the very least from college, but in high school, ideally, is being taught and knowing very intimately how you learn best, so that each person knows and has been trained and coached and tested to optimize their own learning in the different ways and domains that we need to learn, like whether it's learning language or learning a physical skill or learning um, tangible skills. But how can you optimize your own learning? And I don't think this is an easy thing to learn. I think you can't learn it by reading books. I don't think you can even learn it on your own. I think it's like high performance athletes, student athletes, when they graduate, if we're on the swim team or the soccer team or whatever it is, or track or weightlifting, have been trained and coached and tested to kind of optimize their performance, personal best. We don't do that with learning in school. It's like, yeah, it's like, we'll do that for athletics, but we're not going to do that for learning. And so, what I'm suggesting is you have a program of training, practice, coaching, testing about your abilities to learn, and not so you're not learning. Yes, you have to learn something specific to learn, but you're not focused on the knowledge and the skills that you're learning. You're focused on this meta skill of learning. Okay. And that is the shift. This hasn't happened yet. And I think that you need to have teachers and coaches and testing and practice to get there. Um, and even though I've been a lifelong learner, I still don't know myself exactly the best method that I should use when trying to learn something new. I mean, I learn and I have hunches, but I haven't been optimized, and I wish I was. And I've been looking for a curriculum on how to optimize learning, how to learn how to learn and optimize that. And I haven't found it anywhere in the world. So it's not like, well, they're doing it here and we should do it. No, I think it may be hard to do without an AI as part of the group that is teaching you, because there is a lot to track. Space repetition of the kind that's customizable to you is one example of of that, which is that you are being reminded of things that you want to memorize. Is for memorization, that you're being reminded of things just before the moment when you forget them, and that way you can kind of stretch out and not have to be reminded as often until the point where you actually have memorized it. And so that is one kind of example in which you can use AI to help with this task of optimizing your learning. So right now you're kind of on your own, sad to say. Again, I haven't found it, but I think if you're at least aware of it and your question, ask yourself the question: can I optimize my own ability to learn? What do I need to do? How many reps do I need to do before I sleep? What's this proper sequence that I should do to learn, material, or if I want to increase my rate of understanding, what is that sequence? And so um, you might be able to self-teach yourself with the help of others in that way, but and by the way, if you are really feeling ambitious, why don't you just invent this thing for us all? Make $1 billion. No, no, wait. Don't make $1 billion. That's not good for you. Make $1 million, and that'll be good enough. So um, I think it's the uber meta skill that you want to graduate with, but I'm just not aware of anybody who's anywhere who's actually doing that. Um, but it's a great opportunity for the use of new technology and something to shoot for.
Hey, thank you so much. I want to maybe close by talking about something you are working on right
Sure.
now.
Yeah.
So I know you've been working on this ambitious project this year called the
Yeah.
Desirable 100-Year Future Project. So as I understand, it's like an attempt to paint a detailed picture of the next century and including tons of things that people might be worried or optimistic about, like AI, genetic engineering, surveillance. So can you share how this project has been evolving and have you learned
Yeah.
something by doing this project?
Um, it is a very ambitious project to kind of imagine all of 100 years because I was trying to imagine also the intervals of 25 years, 50 years, 75 years. And to help me do that, I took a 25-year horizon and I imagined some scenarios for a positive scenarios for the world and for China. So I have a new book that was released 2 months ago in China. It's only a Chinese language. There's no English version of it. It's only in Chinese. And it's called 2049, which was 25 years ago from when we were working on it. And of course, it's the centennial of the People's Republic. And that was kind of a first step to try and paint different scenarios for the future. And these are plural, they're not predictions, they're plural stories about a desirable future. In this case, a desirable future for the world and for China in particular. What if things went well in China? What would its role be in 25 years? What would it be like doing? So I began that process, and again, that book is now out in China. It's doing very, very well. It's a bestseller there. I think they're going to make we just signed a contract to do a version for Taiwan in the complex characters, they call it. And so that is one step in that direction of this 100-year future that I would want to live in. In the meantime, I also have another new book out, which just came out next week, called Colors of Asia, which is a mini version of my big Vanishing Asia books. But in this case, they're all arranged by color. All the images, there's 800 images, they're all kind of sequenced by colors, which makes it kind of fun and a little bit lighter touch than my big, massive Vanishing Asia books. But this is based on my 50 years of photographing in Asia, over 35 countries, and trying to document the past, not the future. This is all about the past and the present a little bit. And so that's available on Amazon. Colors of Asia. Um, that's my newest book project. Um, the other 100-year desirable future is still an uh, ongoing challenge. It's really hard to imagine a world full of ubiquitous AI and genetic engineering and constant monitoring that I want to live in, but I think it's possible. I think we're going to get there. Um, I appreciate all of you who've taken some time this Saturday to give me some of your attention, which is one of the most precious things that you have, your time. Thank you for um, great questions, for hosting. And I have to say that I have been interviewed by a lot of people, but nobody has pinpointed the things that I think are central as much as you have. So thank you for your hard work in preparing for this. Um, you picked the five things that I would have picked as the most important things. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah, thank you, Kevin. This has been absolutely fascinating. So again, thank you everyone for your time. We will end the webinar here. Thank you. Have a
You're
great
welcome.
weekend. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
再见，再见。